that being the best.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was what they used on all the old pre-war instruments. Well, you should ask, because this is an Adirondack.
Oh, right.
Isn't it? Tom Sands one. Yeah. So.
Is that the one that's got the special back and sides? I'm sure that's old growth Adirondack. You're not going to put a piece of plywood on top of something like that.
But Adrian, actually, interestingly, you were talking about multi-piece backs. I mean, Stefan Sobel has made a number of Scantling guitars where he's used
tiny
thin
strips
of Brazilian. You know,
yeah.
And they're fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they get a lot of the Brazilian they were using came from fence posts, Brazilian fence posts. You know, they used to use Brazilian rosewood for fence posts, and of course they're only that wide.
And there's really no justification for burning that stuff and throwing it away. When, as you say, you can cut it into narrow strips, and which is what Stefan Sobel did. You know, cut it. I think Nigel Forster told me they were old scraps that were being thrown out, and they got these scraps and made some really good backs out of them. So glue joints are your friend.
Make a guitar of glue.
I taught a student at Newark, and after he left, he made this YouTube video. He made an entire electric guitar from like lollipop sticks, laminated together, thousands and thousands of them, and he dyed them all different colours and used them as pixels to make a kind of Super Mario picture on the front. It's an amazing YouTube video. He must have spent about 800 hours on this, and most of the guitar is glue, I think. But yeah, any more questions?
Will you be bringing that to the next meet-up, or are you?
No, this is spoken for. It's going to a dealer in Holland.
Right.
A fellowship of acoustics. So if you want to buy it,
Senior guitar thing in there.
go and see Rudy.
It's just around the corner from my place.
Oh,
Is it?
Not far off.
so you might be able to see it when it's finished.
That one,
Yeah.
most certainly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
When you saw your wood down, it's what, 5 or 6 mil thick at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you join it together at that stage, when it's that thick?
Usually, yeah. I'll usually clean it up, because if you clean up the saw marks, you can see the grain, and then you can make decisions about how it goes together. Because this would, this is 4 pieces from. It may have even been the rest of this piece. I can't remember. But these 2 inner pieces will be book matched to each other, and then the outer pieces will also be mirrored. So they are 4 book matched pieces still.
But normally it's easier to glue together 2 5mm thick pieces of wood than it is 2 2.5 millimeter thick pieces of
Well,
wood.
I take a sort of in between,
And they take
thing,
the
because
wood a bit.
as you get to make a good glue joint, you've got to what they call shoot the edge, which means putting a plane on its side and planing the edge, so that when you hold the 2 halves up to a window, there's no light at all. And it takes quite a long time to get that. Now, the thinner the piece of wood is, the easier it is to get that joint. But you don't want to go, when you glue it up, there's usually a little bit of a step, so you're going to have to come thinner than that anyway. So it's kind of...
So the next question is, having got those pieces of wood, you've then got a piece of wood which is so wide, and it's 5 or 6 mil thick or thereabouts. What thickness is your top when it's finished?
It's usually, on a steel string, the larger the guitar is, the thicker the top will be. Because it's like a floor. I think of the top of a guitar as it's like a floor in a building. And the bigger the span is, the more support it needs. So, the bigger the guitar is, the thicker you would leave the top. And on a steel string, it depends on the individual piece of wood, because really what you're working to is a flexibility rather than a dimension. Because some pieces of wood are stiffer than others. But typically it would be about 3 millimeters in the middle. And then you'd make the edges a bit thinner, so maybe 2.5 mil at the edges.
So how do you machine it down?
Drum sander.
Yeah, I use a drum sander mostly, which takes a long time because...
It's a lot of dust as well.
It's a lot of dust, but you can't take very much off in one pass because it's only designed for It's not designed for reducing the thickness, it's designed just to put a finish on the wood. So you might have sort of 10 or 20 passes through the sand to get it down, and then I would finish off with a plane finally. Because the drum sand has got 80 grit sandpaper on, which in guitar making terms is quite coarse, so you then got to get a smooth finish. And what I do, after I've glued it together, before I take the thickness down, I'll inlay the rosette, because you're inlaying it into a hole that's maybe 1.5–2 mil deep, and then you've got to scrape it flat. So as you scrape it level with the surface, you're removing some wood. So you don't want to be to final dimension, then inlay the rosette and then scrape some more. So put the rosette in, get the top surface as clean and smooth and flat as it can be, and then take the thickness down from the back. And then, you know, after it's been through the drum sand, I would use a hand plane to kind of finalise to fine tune the thickness. Because the drum sander will get an even thickness all the way across, whereas what I'm actually looking for is to make it thinner at the edges. So you then get the block plane and plane carefully.
But when you're voicing the top, are you actually fiddling around with the top, or do you fiddle around with the braces?
It's more the braces, really. I'm getting to the top to a thickness where, in terms of flexibility, it feels about right. And then gluing the braces on, and the braces are glued on as a rectangular section, and then they carved to make the section more triangular, which is kind of, this could be a wormhole that could go on for hours. But the strength of a brace is mostly in its height, not much in its width. So they want to be tall and thin, and because the stiffness is determined by the height, you can remove a lot of that weight but maintain the height by triangulating the section. And then you want the braces to get lower as they get to the edge, so the edge is more pliable and more flexible, and the stiffness is in the middle around the bridge. That's sort of approximately how it works. And also when you're tuning it with the bracing on, what you're listening as you're tapping it, you're listening for as wide a range of resonances as you can get. If you just have a strong resonance on one note, like a G sharp, every time you hit that G sharp, it's going to jump out from all the other notes.
Is that a wolf note?
Yeah. But what you want to do is spread those resonances out, so there's all sorts of different, more subtlety, more resonances. And so I nearly always brace the guitars asymmetrically, so that you haven't got the same resonance on one half as the other. That helps to get a more diverse spread of resonance. So you're not favouring any single note, but kind of spreading it across the whole thing.
Do you touch the back to the sides first, or the top
The
to
top.
the sides first?
Well, I build in the Spanish, traditional
Do you call that
Spanish.
top down or bottom up? Is that what?
The soundboard is made first on a solera, which is like a scooped mould. So it's kind of made into, so that it will have a domed shape. The underside of the braces are shaped into this dished form. And when you take it off the dish, it's got a dome on it. And so that goes on the solera, and the solera has this is like a workboard, has a neck extension. Then you glue the neck onto the soundboard, because it has a Spanish heel coming into the guitar. And then the sides are built around that and go into wedges in the neck. And then the back goes on, and when you put the back on, that fixes the neck angle, which is determined by a shim at this end. This is a whole different lecture.
Yeah, I think Froggy Bottom guitars do a similar thing, and they say that because often builders do it the other way around, so that when you look into the guitar it looks cleaner. So they'll put the top on last, so they can make all the back looking immaculate, but they're not really able to voice it in the same way. It's easy to voice it and get a better tone if you put the top on first.
But Adrian builds his things more, your guitar, your steel strings are built in the classical system. What you're talking about is the modern steel string building system, where you do fix the back. The body and the neck are completely separate animals, they're just bolted together. And the back and sides are built in a mould, and then the tops, you know, as I say, you can then clean up any glues, and then the top's glued on the box. We just have a box and a separate neck, and then they're joined together.
I mean, but you're right. I put the back on last, so I do have space to get in there when the top's attached to the sides, and kind of modify, check what's going on there. Because when you're tapping the free plate, the most flexible part is the edge, right? As soon as you glue it to the sides, that's rigid, so it completely changes the dynamic of the top. So then to sort of tap it again once it's attached to the sides,
It's got
while
to
the
be
back
better,
is
hasn't
open,
it?
you can get in there and modify things.
Right, completely unrelated again. But what about finish on the inside of the guitar? No.
It's not something I generally do. And one
Imagine
reason is,
it would stabilise it more, or is that a bad thing to stabilise it?
I don't know. I mean, one reason for not doing it is that if you, in the future, if there's a crack and you want to glue a pleat on the inside, the finish is going to resist that glue adhering to the wood.
Imagine though it would, you know, limit structural changes afterwards, and it's not going to absorb moisture from the inside.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the argument for doing it, but it's not something I do on the whole, because I don't think it's necessary. I've been building for 30 years and I've not really had a problem in that respect. So, you know, and I do see my old guitars coming back to me every now and then for repair work or setup or things, and I haven't noticed any kind of catastrophic examples from the past that have caved in or anything. Or
You've
split.
obviously got this phenomenal knowledge, and there's no doubt a few of you in the UK who've got this. Can you see a new generation of people coming through who are getting this knowledge, or do you get concerned that the knowledge of how guitars are best built might disappear?
No, not at all. There's a lot. I have noticed in the last 10 or 15 years a huge explosion in new luthiers, most of whom are young. And I've been teaching. I taught at Newark from 2008 till this last summer. And you know, we had a lot of young students through there who, I'm happy to say, kind of defy all the stereotypes of what we talk about young people constantly being on their iPhones. And these are people who are really interested in learning hand skills and, you know, getting deeply involved in the kind of handcrafted tradition.
Yeah.
Yes.
When I stopped building guitars, retired, gave Dave White, had all my wood, gave him all the wood, but all of my big machine tools, the band saws and things, went to a young lad of 26 who'd come with me and built a couple of guitars using my equipment, and he wanted to take it up. So he's now, you know, he's 26, well, he's 30 now, but you know, he's building the equipment. So he had all my big power tools and band saws and drill presses and all the various router setups and things.
And I think the big change, which is kind of obvious when you think about it, is the internet, YouTube.
Yeah.
There's so much information out there, as well as misinformation, but, you know, when I started, there was no internet, and you found out stuff through a magazine, the Guild of American Luthiers, which was a kind of information sharing society in America, which anybody, you didn't have to be American to join it, but that was kind of the main source of information then.
Campiano and Nagelson.
Yeah, a few special books.
Yeah.
You know, but it was a totally different world in terms of finding stuff out. And now you look on YouTube and there's a million and one videos on.
There's a really good one on bridge making that I can recommend. It's a bit speeded up. It's one of these fast process ones, but it's really good.
Yeah, I think he's referring to a video I did recently. I got a GoPro camera and you can do the time-lapse thing, and I just filmed myself doing all the parts of making a bridge, and then when you do the time-lapse stuff, there's no sound. So I'm showing it to my wife. We're just messing about doing sound effects going zzz. So she said, oh yeah, you should do that as the soundtrack. So I sat down with a microphone and a computer and watched the video. And I did all the sound effects. So if you go on my YouTube channel, you can see how to make a bridge with sound.
You should all subscribe to Adrian's YouTube channel. It's one of my favourites.
Anyway, I think, unless we're going to go down a rabbit hole of how do I build a guitar, I think that's it.
That's another workshop entirely, I suspect.
Thank you very much. Next year.
Thank you.